to make declarations. Other public servants, other public officials are under a similar obligation. But parliamentarians, tend to be the juicy and sexy ones in the room. So now, in accordance with the requirements of the Integrity Commission Act, the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, like many of the other parliamentarians, submitted a declaration as to his income, his assets, and his liabilities. To date, the Prime Minister's declarations for several years, 3 years I think it was, has not been certified. His declarations have not been certified. Indeed, the Prime Minister's declarations ostensibly triggered an investigation by the IC. So the IC undertook a probe into the Prime Minister's declarations and indeed his personal finances, and they undertook that investigation for a number of years, about 3 years, at least 2 years. They even went as far as to avail themselves of the services of an independent international forensic accounting examiner. Notwithstanding the work of that individual, by the way, the findings of which we have not been made aware of, the report from whom we, the public, certainly the Parliament, has not been furnished with. But as I said, notwithstanding the services of a forensic auditor, the Integrity Commission, by way of its Director of Investigations, Kevin Stevenson, established no finding of impropriety or illicit enrichment on the part of Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica. Instead of making a recommendation, if he has any recommendation to make, to the then Director of Corruption Prosecutions at the IC, or certify the Prime Minister's declarations, which was the appropriate action, he did neither of those things. So Kevin Stevenson, notwithstanding his report laced with all kinds of editorial comments that many of us believe were designed for a particular effect, yes, he neither referred findings for a ruling by Mrs. Prince Kamika at the time, nor did he opt to certify the Prime Minister's statutory declarations in circumstances where he did not essentially establish any finding of impropriety. What did he do? Many of us believe that he quite cleverly, he quite deliberately elected to have the Prime Minister hanging in abeyance. That's what we believe. I am an onlooker, and that's how I view this thing. You have the Prime Minister hanging in abeyance by way of referring to TAJ and FID. TAJ being, of course, Tax Administration Jamaica. FID, of course, being the Financial Investigation Division, yes, of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, FID. So you opt to advance. You did your work. You weren't able to establish what you perhaps may have wanted to establish. And what you did was to pass it a little further. Instead of certifying the declarant or referring the declarant for prosecution. And there are some of us who believe that that action was deliberate. because Kevin Stevenson, at all material times during the conduct of the IC's investigation, during the conduct of his investigations, he would have had the TAJ and the FID or any other key and strategic body at his disposal, as the IC did when it engaged an international forensic accounting examiner. There's an MOU in place between the IC and some critical agencies. And in accordance with that memorandum of understanding, Kevin Stevenson of the IC could have availed himself of the services of the FID and the expertise and skill sets and capacity of the FID, and of course TAJ or whoever else. Why did he not do that? Perhaps it wasn't convenient so to do, because perhaps it could have been a situation where there would be no choice but to certify the Prime Minister's declarations. And what would that have meant? That would have meant that Dayton Campbell would not have been able to say what he said at UTEC on Monday, that Mark Golding's statutory declarations are certified and Andrew Holness' statutory declarations are in abeyance, not certified. Mark Golding would not be able to say the things he's up and about the political stump saying, that Andrew Holness' statutory declarations are not certified. So Kevin Stevenson, by virtue of his actions and the fact that he has not certified the Prime Minister's statutory declarations, has left the Prime Minister hanging in abeyance. But guess what? That matter is at the appropriate place. The Prime Minister will have his day in court, and he has done the appropriate thing, because no entity, not Delroy Chuck or any parliamentarian, can direct the IC. The IC can only be directed or ordered by the court consequent on or pursuant to judicial review. So we shall see what we shall see. But fast forward to this day in sport. 16th April 2025, where Ronnie Florence is presiding as Director of Corruption Prosecution at the Integrity Commission, where, based on a number of things, there is much left to be desired, and there is much that have caused members of the public, myself included, to feel as though and to believe as though the Integrity Commission at this time does not enjoy optimal trust and confidence. Certainly at this time, by virtue of the utterances and conduct of Greg Christie, and I can cite the example, listeners, of an incidence of shooting at the IC. Well, an incidence of shooting where a staffer at the IC was the victim. When the media descended on the premises of the IC, the question was put to Greg Christie, as to his thoughts and assessment. What happened there, sir? Greg Christie told the journalist, Kirk Wright it may have been, of TVJ, ask the government that. Those were Greg Christie's words. Ask the government that. Kirk Wright, the journalist, no doubt taken aback by what was essentially said, because Kirk Wright would know, this guy is a seasoned journalist, that hey, public officials are usually very sober and very judicious, certainly in their utterances. So Kirk Wright was obviously taken aback. So when Greg Christie said, ask the government that, almost naturally, Kirkright had to fire the logical follow-up question. What did he ask? He said, "What does that mean, sir?" And what did Greg Christie respond and say? Greg Christie, the executive director, the head, the operational head of the Integrity Commission, responded to the journalist by saying, "Ask them what that mean." That's how he responded. That's how he doubled down. This man is a trained lawyer. Greg Christie is a trained lawyer. These persons, both in their professional capacity and in their private capacity, are persons who are typically restrained, sober and judicious in their utterances, and indeed judicious in their conduct. That utterance was very, very telling. To this day, it is very telling. Quite frankly, how Greg Christie continued in office as executive director of the IC, having uttered those words publicly, is beyond me. And that is why many members of the public are delighted that retired Justice Seymour Panton is out. How could the head of the Integrity Commission, an entity, a commission of parliament that is so consequential, so important, of such considerable moment in the public affairs of this country, have its head, its CEO, Greg Christie, saying the things he said in the wake of that incident of shooting? Ask the government that. Ask them what that mean, or ask the government what that mean. Do you know what he was intimating? Just pause to think about it for a moment. A staff member, one of Greg Christie's colleagues, was the victim of shooting, shot. There is no pilot, listeners, on a round of ammunition. No pilot not there upon the projectile that is discharged from a weapon when a weapon is discharged. So when a weapon is discharged, that bullet, that projectile can go anywhere and it may do considerable damage. In other words, it may result in loss of life. That staff at the IC could have been a victim of murder. And what did the head of the entity respond by saying? Ask the government that. Ask them what that means. That was a most unbelievable, repugnant, reprehensible, disgusting comment for the head of the Integrity Commission to have made. Just step back for a moment and think about it. What was operating on Greg Christie's mind? Indeed, what would have been informing his disposition such that he could have even not only thought those things, but ventured to utter the things he uttered? And you know, I was on a program last evening, CVM's lead story with Raymond Price of the PNP. And there's a little Jamaican proverb that I would commend to Raymond Price and the entire PNP this morning. In Jamaica, we have a way of saying, today for me, tomorrow for you. The reason why this IC issue is of considerable moment and very, very important is because it goes to the heart of governance in this country. The IC, by virtue of its mandate, by virtue of its statutory powers, can make or break a government. if persons at the IC are injudicious and are driven by malice or anything that is untoward, they may act ultra vires and they may act in ways that are inappropriate. And there are some very serious allegations swirling around right now, because it is alleged, listeners, that one of the senior investigators at the IC, yes, made a statement, and the statement was excluded from a report to Parliament due to the intervention, the alleged intervention of an influential official at the IC. So that senior investigator apparently had some issues with how unethically persons at the IC were approaching a particular investigation and the conduct of a particular investigation. That is what the allegation is. And that person, who has since exited the IC in terms of being a staff member, yes, the statement, the opinions of that person were quite curiously excluded from a report. And that allegedly happened as a result of the intervention of a quote-unquote influential official at the IC. It gives you the sense, based on these allegations, that there are some very disturbing and worrying things happening at the Integrity Commission. But for those who are chomping at the bits for the opposition PNP, because they are in their, typical desperation mode, and anything that may even remotely resemble something that could be politically advantageous to them and help them secure state power in this country is going to be fair game for them. But the simple proverb looms large this morning. Remember, folks, that many of you are declarants. As a senator, as a legislator, albeit of recent vintage, I am under a certain obligation now. I will be a declarant. I will come under the IC's whip. The thing with me though is that when I run certain games, I'm the grandson of Daphne Morgan. I'm the son of Melbourne Morgan, both predeceased. We were raised poor, but there's one thing with us. We're very firm, and we don't play with our personal integrity. So I can say what I'm saying this morning about the IC, because Kevin Stevenson can't ramp with me. Greg Christie, Wassara can't ramp with me. And again, I'm commending these words to the opposition PNP. Today for me, tomorrow for you. You are essentially the 84 of you, well, not the 84 of you rather, the 14 of you in the lower house, and the 8 of you in the upper house, bringing the number to 22, no sir? The 22 of you are declarants. And as I said before, based on the relationship between Ronnie Florence and Dayton Campbell, any decision taken by the goodly gentleman may be viewed and will come under suspicion. And that is what makes this Ronnie Lawrence appointment problematic, contentious, and I dare say untenable. The parliamentary leaders of the government, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith and Edmund Bartlett, have written to the IC to this effect. They wrote to, among other things, register serious concern with the acting appointment of Mr. Ranif Lawrence in circumstances where he is a cumbolo, a bosom buddy, apparently, of Dayton Campbell. What would happen if Ranif Lawrence is to consider any matter pertaining to Dayton Campbell, or any matter pertaining to the PNP, or any matter pertaining to the JLP? That is essentially the point we're making. Having regard to his antecedents, having regard to the relationship between the two, which is asserted on social media by Dayton Ricardo Campbell, the embattled PNP General Secretary, any action or inaction on the part of Ranif Lawrence will be viewed with a particular degree of suspicion. And that is problematic in and of itself. And you know why it is? There's a particular mantra in jurisprudence such as ours here in Jamaica. As a democratic society, a particular mantra is of considerable moment. Where it concerns the administration and dispensation of justice, justice must not only be done, but must be manifestly and demonstrably seen to be done. With Ranif Lawrence, Dayton Campbell's alleged cumbolo, being the Director of Corruption Prosecution, albeit acting at the IC, any decision taken by this gentleman, a gentleman, by the way, against whom neither myself nor the government make any or cast any aspersion as to his professional qualifications. The gentleman may well be eminently qualified to serve as Director of Corruption Prosecution at the IC. But having regard to a particular relationship that Dayton Campbell himself, by way of a post on social media, has asserted, and we have yet to hear any disavowing of that, although the PNP sought to do a little buffoonery the other day, which I had to call out Monday morning, where they issued a press release to intimate that the relationship between Dayton Campbell and Ranif Lawrence is a past association. Rubbish. Dayton Campbell's post was January 26, 2025. They are apparently bosom buddies. And you try a sleight of hand in a press release about past association. Rubbish. That kind of rubbish is always dead on arrival. And so the fundamental point is that justice must not only be done, but must be manifestly and demonstrably seen to be done. If Ranif Lawrence elects to charge Marlon Morgan tomorrow morning, that decision must be viewed with suspicion, will be viewed with suspicion, have to be viewed with suspicion. If Ranif Lawrence elects to not charge Michael Phillips tomorrow morning, that decision must be viewed with suspicion, shall be viewed with suspicion, have to be viewed with suspicion. And that is the point being made. The gentleman's position is invariably problematic and, as I said earlier, untenable. And for those who are gleeful and are delighted that the persons who are registering the complaint right now are the green shirt wearing people, what they need to understand is that from time to time in life, the shoe ends up on the other foot. It may well be a case, probably sometime in the not too distant future, that you yourself or the person who is concerned with a particular development. It was Mark Golding, listeners, who said the following, speaking at a PNP political rally in St. James recently. In referring to the IC, he said, do the right thing for the people of Jamaica. Defend the Integrity Commission and make sure the people who are commissioners are independent, reputable people, not political partisans who are going to use their influence there or could do and give the perception that the thing is biased. These are Mark Golding's words. He was speaking in St. James recently. And the key part here, he says, not political partisans who are going to use their influence there or could do and give the perception that the thing is biased. Ronnie Florence may give the perception, and in fact he does give the perception, that there is bias at the IC. We run to the NPR News and come back with a discussion at 10:10 here on Straight Up. Stay with us.
News Talk 93 FM. Heard everywhere.